Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth.
Tonight, the leader of California's Reparations Task Force is speaking out after state lawmakers blocked two reparations-related proposals. The California Legislative Black Caucus decided to withhold those bills from moving forward. That led to a big protest at the Capitol over the weekend, as you see here. That's what the video is that you're watching right now. KCRA 3 Capitol correspondent Ashley Zavala spoke with the reparations leader.
Yeah, so Ashley, what does she have to say about how this whole session ended over the weekend?
Golston and Lisa, Camila Moore was the chairwoman of California's historic Reparations Task Force. That group wrapped up its work last year after spending years studying the effects of slavery, racial discrimination, and its impact on Black Californians. She says she felt betrayed by the Black Caucus after it decided to block two bills she says were fundamental for reparations. Emotions still high after this scene at the state capitol over the weekend.
It's Black people stopping their own people from getting their reparations.
Reparations supporters frustrated by the Legislative Black Caucus's last-minute decision to block votes in the Assembly on proposals that would establish a state agency and state fund for reparations. The Black Caucus divided, with some saying they were afraid of the governor's veto, while the caucus leader, Assemblymember Lori Wilson, claimed the bills did not have the votes.
I think what happened on Saturday was unconscionable.
Camila Moore led California's Reparations Task Force that helped come up with these recommendations. She did not expect this.
What we saw was a complete betrayal by the California Legislative Black Caucus against their own constituents. They chose to prioritize their ego and their own self-interest over the people that they claim to serve.
It seemed like Democratic legislative leaders were hands-off about this. Do you think they should have stepped in?
I do think that the Assembly leadership, namely the Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas, should have, intervened. In effect, he sided with the Black Caucus.
How do you, the advocates, the supporters, how do you all move forward here? What are the next steps?
The next step for us is to keep pushing to hold the California Legislative Black Caucus accountable.
Yes on six! Yes on six!
We tried to get a response from caucus leader Assemblymember Lori Wilson at a different reparations-related rally that she was supposed to headline at the state capitol Tuesday, but she canceled her appearance. I tried asking supporters about the situation.
Do you have any thoughts that you want to share right now?
They dodged the question.
Now, Assemblymember Wilson's spokesperson told us in part she canceled her appearance there because she did not want to detract from the importance of that rally. As we worked on this story, we also tried to interview California Secretary of State Shirley Weber, who wrote the law that launched the Reparations Task Force years ago. She declined our request. We should note her daughter is Assemblymember Akilah Weber. She's another Black Caucus member who is under scrutiny for Saturday's actions. Back to you.
All right, we'll keep following this along with you. Ashley, thanks for bringing us up to date on that. And
all right, let's just get right to it. The reparations bill that was supposed to go through the California legislature that would officially establish a reparations agency, which meant that some money was going to start moving, well, apparently it's been blocked. And it wasn't by just the usual suspects. The ones leading the charge was California's so-called Black Assembly Caucus. I guess this is supposed to be the state version of the Black Congressional Caucus. But just like the CBC, these guys' job is to represent white power. Their job is to be the Negroes sucking up to massa, and that's exactly what they did. Now, this happened in liberal California, mind you. Supposed to be so liberal California. Supposed to be the Negroes who are so free, and yet look what they're doing. Buck dancing to beat the band. What happened was when the bill came up, they literally waited until the last hour of the Legislative Assembly. They waited until literally the last moment to show their true colors. They had all this time to go ahead and put it through. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. We need to do this on our way out the door. We need to do this right before we close the doors. That way there'll be as little time as possible to stop it. And hopefully we'll have to only answer one or two questions. No questions at all, actually. We're going to try to do this in a way where we don't have to answer any questions because we did it on our way out the door. There's not going to be any bill. There's not going to be any reparations agency. Goodbye. This is what you got here. Your Black California politicians. And here they are speaking in one voice saying, hell no, we're against reparations. And before we go any further, this individual Reggie Jones-Sawyer, this clown, this buck-dancing scumbag, This guy has a long record of attacking reparations. I made a video about him 2 years ago, detailing how he was attacking reparations then, because he demanded that reparations has to apply to every black person, regardless of ancestry, regardless when they got here, hell, regardless of anything. If they just claim to be black, give them a check. And he was part of that whole effort to lead the charge to stop a reparations bill. Let's go ahead and get the governor to veto this or something. He didn't want it to go through. The black grassroots forced that reparations task force to actually live up to its name. The black grassroots forced them to stay on code because they didn't want to. That's not what they were there for. So what happened was it was the black grassroots that shot down this Assemblyman Sawyer's asinine demand. But that was 2 years ago when he pulled that, October of 2022. So this wasn't some spur of the moment thing for him. The point was to stop the reparations bill on the way out the door this year. And hopefully, once the election's over with, months from now, hey, the California Assembly convenes a new session, but by then, memories are short, so hopefully everybody will have forgotten about this, and they're all hoping that they can escape the wrath of the voters. That's the plan. Sawyer and the rest of them, they hated reparations the whole time from the very beginning. And we in the black media have been telling you about this. You had a lot of Negroes out there, many of them shills, but many of them are just unthinking clods, trying to tell us how great their local assemblyman is. Not have known him for 30 years. I did an entire video 15 years ago where all Detroiters now, where I talked about exactly why that kind of stupid hound dog loyalty is so foolish by black people. I'm sorry, but your local black politician, there's a reason he ain't done a dang thing for you. This Sawyer clown, he's emblematic of a far larger, far more pernicious disease within the black body politic. He was one of the main folks leading the charge to make it where our reparations was going to be going to everyone. That's how you know that there's a program at work here. You think it's some accident he's showing up, and instead of him saying, well, you know what? The black voters have spoken. I got to support their interests. Instead, it's like, I'm laughing at you. Yeah, no reparations if I have anything to say about it. And that comes down to the black voters out there themselves. Here that bastard is openly mocking the black voters of California on the single most important issue facing black people out there. Now, I want for all of these shills and bootlicks who infest the comment section, go ahead and tell me how this clown is any different or any better than the most racist good old boy in Mississippi. How is this guy any different or any better than any Republican? How is this kind of disrespect any better or any different than what you say about Trump? At least Trump never pulled a stunt quite like this. Trump would have had at least the decency to say, well, I don't know if I'm going to be doing this on camera. I just tell him that I'm not going to do it every time. No, not this guy. This guy's given the middle finger to every black person in California and every black person in America who's demanding our reparations. That's what this is meant to be. How is this any different than the most bigoted white supremacists you could think of in public office? And these are the people who the roly-polies and the joke reads and the rest of the bootlick sellouts and suck-ups say that we're supposed to vote for. This is what's supposed to pass for black political leadership. But it's not just this creep. You have pretty much every black politician in the state legislature who are fighting this. And not surprisingly, you got Gavin Newsom siding with the sellout Black Caucus. He says that they're owed an apology. Yeah, Gavin Newsom says, you guys, you owe them an apology for being treated the way they were treated, to be doxxed, to be personally maligned and attacked. Now, I can't speak to anyone doxing anyone. People make that claim all the time, and I can't speak to any veracity of that. But the only thing that they're owed is a swift recall from office. Maligned, don't dream. They're not being maligned at all. They're being accurately described vis-a-vis their behavior. Attacked? No, they're being held accountable for defying and undermining their own black voters. That's what's happening here. There are no attacks. The attack is what's been happening to black people for 500 years in this country, and they've been part of the problem. It's no surprise at all that Newsom's out there. After all, a puppet isn't very far from its handler, now is it? Puppets don't stray very far from their master. And if you think that these freaking Democrats, the white Democrat leadership, were not behind this, you're a fool. Those Negroes, they don't even decide to eat their butter biscuits without Massa slathering the butter on for them. They wouldn't dream of it. So what's happening is you got these bootlicks being the face of an anti-black policy pushed by the white Democrat leadership. They're all guilty. They're all complicit. But understand something. This is the beauty of reparations as a political issue. It forces everybody to have to go on the record and show where they stand. But it also shows the power of consistency. See, this is the result of black folks being on our square and fighting for this thing and not letting the issue die. That's what they didn't count on. Black folks, especially the black baby boomers, they were just the kings of short memories, and that's what this clown Sawyer's counting on. He's sitting here acting like this because he thinks to himself, you dumb niggas, y'all always just forget a few days from now, the next news cycle, or the next Cardi B video, or the next Sexy Red video, y'all will be on to something else, so I can get away with this. It's gonna be a victimless crime. I can go ahead and mock y'all, give y'all the middle finger. Y'all gonna just forget about it, cause you always do's. That's what he's counting on. That is why he's acting like that. Because he's gotten away with it so many times before. Because black people tragically have shown to have short memories. But not this new generation, starting with Gen X. Our memories are a hell of a lot longer. And thanks to the black media, we're making sure you don't forget. And this is the reason why. This is the power of persistence. We've been out here for years pushing this issue. We haven't let it die. We haven't let it be diminished. And the bad guys have seen that. They're understanding that it's not going away. Now, the lie that they're trying to push is that they're going to bring this issue up in the next assembly session. Now, y'all just need to wait. Ain't that always the scam? Before we vote for you, Obama, you're going to have to promise to us what you're going to do. I can't promise anything. I got to win first. Got to win this election first. After I get in office, maybe we might be able to talk about it then. Okay, we vote for Obama. He gets into office. All right, here's what we need you to do. I can't do anything. I got this healthcare thing, and I got these feminist rights, and make sure that abortion is a national law. And I got to make sure that all of them illegal aliens are going to be legalized. I got to take care of that first. Stuff much more important than you. You got to wait. You got to wait. Besides, I got to get reelected. I got to get that reelection now. I can't endanger that now. Okay, so you'll endanger it for the LGBT community. You'll do it for illegal aliens. It's okay to go ahead and push all of these unpopular policies for all of these smaller constituencies who can't do anything for you. But for the main party constituency, the backbone of the Democratic Party, all of a sudden can't do anything for you. That's too dangerous. Well, then I guess it's too dangerous for me to vote for you now, isn't it? But as soon as black folks fell for that scam and voted to reelect Obama, he's like, I got him even out the palm of my hand. And next thing you know, the real abuse began. Y'all need to vote for Hillary, because if you don't vote for Hillary, I'll consider it to be a personal insult to my legacy. You got to ensure my legacy. Now he's gone from asking for your vote to now slapping you in the face and telling you owe it to me. Owe it to him? That's what he means. I consider it a personal insult, as if we owe it to him. Owe it to him for what? What did he do to earn our debt? How are we indebted to a man who did nothing for us? But that's Barack Obama for you. And they've been able to get away with that lie so much. You got to wait till the next election. The next election. I can't do anything for you this election. I got to get reelected. Okay, you got well, I got to hand the keys to the White House off to somebody else. Got to hold on to that office now. The mean old Republicans, they ain't going to do nothing for you. Oh, as opposed to you Democrats who ain't doing nothing at all. That's what this is. The same old political treadmill, kick the can down the road. See, they failed to stall reparations as an issue at all with their endless studies and task forces and such. It was never supposed to actually go beyond that. That was the entire plan. That was going to be where reparations died. There would be an alleged study, and there was supposed to be a quote-unquote task force. Bold-sounding name for what was supposed to be nothing. And they would give some mild milquetoast recommendations. And that was supposed to be the end of it. It was supposed to die a quiet death. But the black grassroots had other plans. The black grassroots pushed the issue off the treadmill. The black grassroots did that. And then you had these same California political forces who tried to redefine reparations altogether. It's going to apply to everyone. Ain't that what Reggie Sawyer was saying? It's got to apply to everybody or ain't no reparations. Well, the black grassroots shut that noise down. So now they're trying to go back to the drawing board. That's what this maneuver is meant to be. This is them trying to hit the reset button. They lost this fight, so now they're trying to get a do-over. Well, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. We'll bring it up next session, and I can promise you, when they bring it up again, it's like, well, there's going to be some changes now. There's going to be some big change. This cash reparations thing y'all keep, that's the first thing that needs to be changed. That is the overarching talking point that they've all been using. Cash reparations. Well, if reparations is fine, as long as it ain't cash now. Cash is the problem. You can't be wanting no money now. Cash is the problem. That's how you know we're on the right track. That's how you know cash reparations is the demand that we should be making. By the way, I would love to know if there's any audio recordings of these sellout legislative black assembly members behind the scenes. I mean, we can all guess what kind of things that these clowns would be saying. I'm sure that they would sound exactly like that Mayor Stephen Reed from Birmingham or whatever, saying that they don't need black voters and that they're so brilliant. And I'll bet you that their white Democrat colleagues would be telling them how radical these online folks are, how radical these reparations advocates are. Oh, did you hear how they were yelling out there in the chambers? Oh my God, reparations, it's a cute idea, but it's just so irresponsible. It's just irresponsible. And I can promise you, those Black Assembly Caucus members, like good little slaves, they be amening every word. Really, some black folks just they don't understand the reality now. And what is the reality, massa? That's what they would be saying. It would be great to hear some behind-the-scenes audio recordings of how these traitors and scumbags and sellouts were talking behind the scenes when they think nobody could hear them. Because we've already had enough examples of this where we already know, but still, just for posterity's sake. What actually happened with this whole thing of reparations, the reason that they had to pull this stunt is because this is an issue that got away from them. It was never supposed to get this far. It wasn't supposed to. They thought that they had killed it. They thought they had already set up a pre-planned script, and the end of it would be there would be some loose talk about a task force, and the task force would put together a study, and the study would have some minor recommendations somewhere, and by then everybody would have moved on and forgotten, and it wouldn't matter. That was the point. Stall for time. These loud Negroes being pushed by those angry voices online, they actually were pushing a policy out into the real world, and we can't allow it to go any farther. It's got to stop here. We got to kill it quietly. It needs to die a natural death in silence when no one's looking. I know. We'll go ahead and say there's a task force and make some recommendations, and by then they'll forget to be going away. Except it didn't go away. We wouldn't allow it. You had the black grassroots led by people like our brother Tariq who got on their behinds and stayed on their behinds. When they were forced to specify who reparations would apply to, that was the black grassroots setting the agenda at that point. Now the black grassroots were in charge, and that's when things went wrong for the bad guys. It was never supposed to actually be defined like that. Black folks are never supposed to be able to actually exercise any sort of power or control. We're supposed to just be sitting back and other people are dictating things and we're just being acted upon and we never get to have our say. That's what was supposed to happen, except we didn't allow it to. They put this together as nothing more than political theater. That's what it was supposed to be. But the black grassroots kicked the bootlicks off the stage and turned it into warfare. White supremacy certainly understands this principle. After all, this has been a 500-year-long war to maintain white supremacy, and that's why they use bootlicks and agents so extensively. The best way to guarantee you win a war is by controlling both sides. They control the Republicans. They also control these Democrats, and that includes the phony black misleadership. Some of you were patting your black California legislators on the back for supporting reparations. I hope that those people who were name-dropping their favorite assembly person, I hope that you guys will stick around now. Be good for you to go ahead and try to boost your chosen boy now. And you wondered why it was that I had nothing but criticism for all of them. Well, now you know why. They didn't want reparations. They never did. All they wanted was a conveniently crafted talking point. They wanted to be able to come to us and falsely claim that they were on the side of reparations. Why, we were in favor of that task force. But it's got to apply to everybody. It's got to be just another grab bag for everybody except for black folks. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to have the bragging rights, at least in front of us. Saying, there was some loose talk about reparations, but it was never supposed to go any farther than loose talk. But since we derailed their plans to kill the issue and actually forced it into the political arena, which, by the way, all these idiots who've been spending years going, reparations, man, they ain't gonna be, ain't never gonna come. Now these people are also quiet too. Interesting how that works. But the white powers that be, they're trying to crow about this one because they're desperate for a win. They saw how close this got. They were scared and they're like, oh, well, at least those bootlicks, they got on code eventually with us. The white media, they're celebrating this. But they've also given the game away in the process. The Aryan propagandists, also known as the Associated Press, they republished an editorial from Cal Matter in which they wrote, political experts say California Democrats are walking a balance beam, trying to advance reparations policies far enough to appease advocates and black voters, but not so far as to incur potential voter blowback. Now, look at the language there. Trying to advance it far enough to appease advocates and black voters? Now, the white media never uses that word appease as a positive. They never use that word in any sort of positive context. They definitely don't use that word when talking about Hillary Clinton. Appeasement is what British Prime Minister Chamberlain did when he made concessions to Adolf Hitler in World War II. That's why the word has a negative connotation, because it was used in association with Prime Minister Chamberlain. Appeasement is a word that the white media uses whenever they're talking about the bad guys in a particular situation, whenever they're talking about people who are dangerous reactionaries and terrorists. That's when they drag out that word. They use it as a negative. And this is how they're talking about black voters. Well, you're having to appease these black voters, trying to appease these dangerous radicals. They would never use the word appease when talking about, say, AIPAC, or supporters of Israel, or talking about the LGBT community. They would never use that word when talking about them. But they made sure to drag it out as far as black folks are concerned. That's how you know they're looking to go, we got to take the gloves off. Let the masks slip. These Negroes are going too far. They're pushing us too far. And then this AP piece goes on to write, or rather repost, that they don't want it to go far enough to incur potential voter backlash. Aren't black voters voters too? See, apparently not. So what other voters are they talking about, I'd like to know. What other groups are they talking about? When they talk about black voters and voter backlash, they're talking about two separate groups. So we know who the black voters are, but who's the other ones? They draw a distinction between black voters and just plain voters. And they make it very clear that's who the priority ought to be given to. These other voters. We don't want voter backlash just because of these advocates and their rabble-rousing. But they admit that this is about them pulling a political con game to do and say just enough to make some of the more gullible black folks out there be pacified with their talk, but not enough for these other groups, the ones they actually care about, to think that the racial pyramid that they all depend on is going to be threatened. Also, this Cal Matters article reprinted by the AP talks about how reparationist polling is an issue, and that's the big gun that they were wanting to aim at. Well, reparations doesn't poll very well. Now, whenever they're talking about gay marriage, or Israel, or immigration, nobody ever points to polls. Nobody ever mentions polls at all when talking about these issues, especially when there's times of controversy, like, say, the war in Gaza. They don't bring up polling then. All of a sudden, just stick to the issues, stick to the particulars. No, let's not go anywhere with any polling now. But with us, we always see the white media bringing up some so-called polls. Why is that? Because as I've explained numerous times, anytime it comes to talk about black people, especially when we're advocating for ourselves, there's always at least 70% of the population who are completely against it. It's been that way since time immemorial. Say you want to get rid of lynching, there's going to be 70% of the population who are completely and thoroughly opposed to stopping lynching. But the interesting thing is that the more you talk about black people's issues, the more you make it where the white media can't treat it as some fringe issue, some kook issue. And the more you talk about it, you normalize black issues, you normalize black interests. The more that you talk about black people's issues and the things that we advocate for, the more you make it where it's okay to talk about it and it's okay to support it. See, you can go back to the very beginning of when they did polling on black people's issues, which was the civil rights movement. More than 2/3 of respondents to all of those polls back in the 60s, they opposed everything that black people were for. They opposed the March on Washington. They opposed the Freedom Riders. So black people getting on buses and saying, you got to stop lynching us, that was opposed by more than 2 out of 3 people in the U.S. And of course, the same went for the Black Lives Matter demonstrations. Anytime black people are advocating for anything, it's an automatic knee-jerk reaction by the vast majority of people in this country. They're going to say, we hate it. We don't like what those niggers are doing. That's just normal. Notice how that never gets brought up. Nobody ever brings up the history of it. Oh, they want to bring up their polls, but they don't want to make sure that you have the polls in proper context so that you understand it. And that you also don't understand that the longer that black people advocate for things, the more popular it becomes. For the AP or Cal Matters or whomever they're talking about, they say 67% of Americans oppose cash reparations, but that a more recent poll shows that opposition to cash reparations has dropped to 61%. So in a few short years, we've gone from nearly 7 out of 10 people in America who oppose reparations to now it's 3 out of 5. But the white media is not putting it that way. They're not framing it like that. In reality, the headline should be that support for cash reparations is growing, because that's exactly what's happening. Support for cash reparations is growing, not shrinking. About the only place where support for cash reparations is shrinking is the California Assembly, especially with the California Black Assembly Caucus. That seems to be about the most place in America where support for cash reparations is actually going down. It's going up everywhere else. So why isn't that the headline from the AP then? Why isn't the headline that the California Assembly shoots down cash reparations despite support for it growing nationwide? Because that's what it would be if you were talking about transgender bathrooms, or if you were talking about illegal immigration, or anything for any constituency that isn't black. They would make sure to frame it that, oh, keep in mind, support for these guys is going up, and these politicians, they're on the wrong side of history. That's what they would be doing. That's how they'd be framing it. But with us, they always make sure to reemphasize the point, black people, nobody wants that at all. And it doesn't matter if support's going up or down. We're not even going to talk about whether or not support is changing or not. It's just nobody likes it, and that's the end of it. And just to make sure that they put a fine point on it, the AP throws in a quote saying that reparations are uniquely unpopular. Uniquely unpopular? Well, they don't even bother to make any sham about the fact that this is not an article at all. It's a hit piece. Uniquely unpopular. You can look at the headline for this thing, talking about bitter defeat and such. Whenever you see the white media putting modifiers on words, especially in the headlines, that's how you know this isn't a news piece at all. You don't use modifiers when it comes to the headlines for what's supposed to be objective news. If it's supposed to be just a fact-based piece, why would you put modifiers on the words? But that's what they're doing, because this is not objective at all. It's an editorial, and this is what they want you to think about it. 61% of Americans oppose cash reparations. That's supposed to make it uniquely unpopular? 61% of Americans opposing something makes it uniquely unpopular? They actually had the nerve to publish that. Now, to say that cash reparations is uniquely unpopular, that means that there's nothing in America at all that is as unpopular as cash reparations. That's what uniquely means. Only this one. So there's no other issue in American politics or society that polls the same as cash reparations? So if 61% opposition to cash reparations makes that uniquely unpopular, then what does it mean when an NPR Ipsos poll finds that 64% of Americans oppose book bans by school boards, and that 69% of Americans oppose book bans by state lawmakers? Gee, that's higher than the 67% of Americans who opposed cash reparations not so long ago. So banning books is far more unpopular than cash reparations. So how can cash reparations be uniquely unpopular when there's other issues that poll far worse? Because this isn't about facts at all for the Aryan propagandist. It's about pushing an anti-black narrative. This is the AP putting this out there, by the way. This ain't Fox News. This isn't Breitbart. This isn't any other of the typical white right-wing sewers. This is supposed to be your wire services, and that's important because as the wire service, AP is picked up and reprinted by everyone, and I mean everyone. Everybody from the big agenda-setting media like ABC and such in the New York Times, all the way down to your local newspaper. They all get their news feeds from the AP. So when AP puts something out there, they all see it. And it's far easier for them to just pay the AP a licensing fee and just reprint what the AP puts out there as opposed to do their own original writing. That's why whenever you pick up the newspaper, whenever you're sitting here looking at these websites, you see an AP byline on there. Now, as you would expect, when it comes to trying to attack black people, the white media feels their attacks would go a lot better if it came from someone who looks like us. And this case is no different. The AP Cal Matters hit piece has some quotes from a guy called Tatish Neteta. He's a professor of political science at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And this Neteta person, he does exactly what the white media wants him to do. He attacks the idea of cash reparations viciously. Look at the language that this guy uses. Uniquely unpopular. A holistically unpopular policy. Now, I've already debunked that lie, but this guy is going out of his way to attack cash reparations. I mean, he got triggered by it. You can tell. He's triggered by the idea of cash reparations. To him, fighting cash reparations is personal. I mean, when you hear the kind of venom and vitriol that this guy has, simply at the idea that black people are going to get what we're owed, this kind of viciousness normally only comes from these little white supremacists who work for these white right-wing think tanks, people like Douglas Murray and others. You say cash reparations and they lose their minds. And when you look up who this Tatish Neteta guy is, you see why it's so personal for him. As the name would imply, he's an immigrant. His parents are from South Africa. Of course, he's been following what's been happening in California. He knows full well that those black assembly members who stonewalled the bill, they had wanted to include all people to be identified as black, so that reparations would have included everyone, especially immigrants like himself who only came to the U.S. a few years ago. And he also knows that the reparations advocates who are raising all this hell about the bill, he knows that they fought to make sure that didn't happen. So he knows that since we specified who reparations applies to, it wouldn't apply to him. And now he's a cheerleader against it. So no wonder he's so eager to call cash reparations uniquely unpopular, a holistically unpopular policy. He means that it's uniquely unpopular with him. So the white media got some tether, who a white university gave some paper-thin credentials to, and then they used this hand-picked tool as their shield to hide behind so he can attack reparations on their behalf, not with facts, but with lies and invective. This Nteta individual is not some detached academic, some cool-eyed, objective person giving their 2 cents. This is a mad-as-hell tether who's butthurt about the fact that the free ride that he's been getting is coming to an end. He's looking at this as the beginning of the end of the handouts the white power was giving to certain hand-picked individuals. He's looking at this and thinking, man, I sure don't want this to become habit-forming because this would be bad for me personally. On the University of Massachusetts Amherst website, Nteta is quoted as having said, "There is a lack of understanding of our history regarding race and politics." Well, I think we can all agree that this guy is a huge part of the lack of understanding of history of race and politics, and that this guy contributes to it. He contributes to all of this willful ignorance that's going on. He knows exactly what the history of race and politics is in the United States, but he also knows that the paycheck that he gets depends on him pretending not to understand it and lending his credentials, such as they are, to trying to confuse anyone else about the subject as well. This guy is completely and thoroughly deranged. He's angry about these developments. But as I've always told you, whenever you see somebody who's showing you a manifestation of anger, you need to ask, what is this person scared of? Because most of the time, anger is usually a mask for fear. And what this guy is scared of is that the hand-picked, cherry-picked special place the white supremacy gave to certain individuals who come from abroad, well, he's scared that that's going to be coming to an end. He's been trying to hide himself amongst the angels, and the angels are kicking him out. That's what he's scared of. And notice the slant the white media puts on this. They don't talk to anyone who's for reparations. They don't talk to people who are going to explain why cash reparations are necessary and why what these guys are doing is wrong. They don't put that slant on it. If you were talking about transgender bathrooms or more money for Israel, then that's what they would be doing. They'd be having everybody on saying, well, here's the reason why transgender bathrooms are a good thing, and this bill failed, and it's a setback for civil rights and all the rest of it. They'd be bringing in Martin Luther King's name, misapplying his name to this. That's what they'd be doing across the board. That is, if they were in favor of it, but they're not. They're against it. They make absolutely no bones about where they stand. And they also make no bones about the fact that they want the reader to be against it too. Not because there's a basis for it, but simply because they don't want it to happen. This Nteta clown would certainly be splaining why cash reparations for illegal immigrants is a good thing. This is how they put a slant on their news coverage, or rather news cover-up. Everything about this hit piece is meant to reinforce their narrative that cash reparations shouldn't happen at all. It's a bad thing. And even if it's not a bad thing, well, it's unpopular, so it shouldn't happen. It makes sense for black politicians to lie to their constituencies because, as this Nteta person put it, the movement can't agree on what reparations should look like. Now, he knows that's a lie. We've been saying from day one exactly what it should look like. A check that is deposited into the bank accounts of everyone who can show from the census that their ancestors were in this country as of 1870. And that's what the entire reparations department would have been. Its job would have been, once these people are identified, here's your check. So we've already worked out exactly what cash reparations should look like. What he doesn't like is that it wouldn't apply to him. This is part of the propaganda. Lie, lie, lie. You got white supremacists who spent years telling the lie. Well, dude, how are we supposed to know who reparations even applies to, dude? You people can't even tell us who it applies to. How are we supposed to figure that out, dude? They did that for years. They tried that for years. And then when the California Reparations Task Force was forced to have to do their jobs and came to their determination, notice how we haven't been hearing that anymore. Oh yeah, the lie died. And now that that lie's been killed, that talking point is in its grave, now we got this tether who's lying and saying that the movement can't agree on what reparations should look like, even though the entire reason that this firestorm is happening is because it has been determined exactly what it should look like. But you have these bought and paid for bootlicks, these recalcitrant backstabbers, who are sitting here slapping their own constituents in the face and waging war on their own voters. That's what's actually happening here. This is not a matter of people can't figure out what cash reparations should look like. It's a matter of it's already been determined what it should look like, and they don't want it to happen. And the AP also quotes this guy as saying that reparations supports increases when cash is taken off the table. That's the white media editorializing. That's what they're doing. Well, reparations would be better if there was no money involved. Okay, what should be involved? Well, anything but money. Okay, how about land? No land. Nothing that actually can be redeemed for money. It should be gestures. Gestures and such. See, this is why Jonathan putting on his cape heart was so damnable with that crap about black people don't want reparations. What they want is an apology. See, that's what happens when you got some black person who does not identify primarily as black. Somebody who identifies by their sexual lifestyle, or somebody who identifies as an immigrant, and then the white media gives these people a platform and says, go ahead and talk about this issue affecting black people. And what a surprise. They all say, we don't like it, we don't need it, nobody needs it. Unless I'm getting something out of it, then it's okay. Do you think Jonathan Capehart would ever say that the quote-unquote LGBT reparations for stuff like the Stonewall riots, you think he'd ever say that the LGBT community shouldn't get anything at all? You think he'd ever say that? Of course not. But he comes to black people and says, well, there shouldn't be anything for black people. That lets you know who he identifies with. Perhaps his white husband is who he identifies with. See, this is just this clown Nettettle talking. He wants cash taken off the table because he knows he won't get a dime of it. This is them not even being subtle about what they want. You niggers need to stop pushing for cash. Stop threatening us. Take cash off the table and maybe you can get something then if you take cash off the table. Well, if it's not cash, then it is nothing. The first problem with what they say is that they're trying to redefine reparations. That's what this is about. They failed to redefine it before. Now they're trying to take a second bite at the apple. Let me tell you something. The only thing that qualifies as reparations is cash. Full stop. That's it. If you're not talking about cash, you ain't talking about nothing. When you take cash off the table is empty. It's not reparations anymore because it doesn't repair anything. But that's what this is all about. Redefining reparations. They're taking a second swing at it. They failed the first time. Now they're trying to take a second pass at redefining it. That's what this is all geared toward. They want to be able to go back to the drawing board and then come back next year and present us with a do-nothing burger, and then they'll falsely claim, see, we passed reparations just like you wanted us to. You said reparations, here it is. We done passed a reparation bill exactly like you said you wanted. That's what they'll say. They'll claim that they did exactly what we wanted them to, and the white media will echo that. The same Associated Press that's sitting here talking about how reparations advocates suffered a bitter defeat. They'll be saying, see, they did exactly what they wanted. Now reparations is a dead issue. We ain't got to hear about it anymore. And what's the reparations? Well, it's going to be a couple of housing vouchers to give you about 5% off your down payment, which will go to a white bank or a white mortgage company. And there might be a little bit of money for an HBCU so that Roly-Poly Martin has a chance of getting a job. And then we'll go ahead and make sure that there's going to be a couple of flight vouchers so you can get on United Airlines and take some trip to Africa, which is going to be conducted by a white tour group, a white-owned hotel on a white airline. That's what they're actually going to try to do. In fact, they actually gave some pathetic examples of what non-cash reparations would be, and it's every bit as insulting and stupid as you would think. A state apology for California's role in perpetuating harm against black Californians, and another one aimed at eliminating hair discrimination in competitive sports. That's supposed to be what qualifies as reparations. Gee, is that what they told Jews? Did they tell Jews that, well, Germany's not going to pay you guys anything, but they'll go ahead and give an apology for those concentration camps? Oh, and how they were shaving all of those Jewish women's heads before throwing them into the gas chambers. Well, they'll go ahead and we're going to go ahead and give you an apology for that. We won't be doing that anymore. But money? Nah, you don't need that. Yeah, reparations for the Holocaust sounds a lot better when it's not cash. They would never do that with any other group. Apology indeed. As Brother Khalid Muhammad said, everybody else gets reparations. They come to us with a damn apology. To hell with your apology. Slavery and the subsequent anti-black racism we've endured ever since wasn't about making black people apologize. It was about money. Our money stolen from us. So that's what reparations must be about. Money. The money that was stolen from us given back to us with applicable interest. Slavery wasn't about hair discrimination in competitive sports. It was about money. We're not sitting here sweating any bullets about hair discrimination. Besides, you can have that addressed without quote-unquote reparations. This is how the white media reported on this. Lies, lies, and more lies. And think about that, how insulting that is. To come up to you and tell you that the greatest crime in human history can be atoned for if they just don't sit here doing hair discrimination. Who the hell is that supposed to appeal to? It's supposed to appeal to the shea butter crowd. The clowns who get in front of the cameras and they're sitting here with their yaki weave and they obsess about that. The low information trolls, cretins, and shills that you see infesting comment sections. That's who that's supposed to appeal to. And this is what the Aryan propagandists are pushing to you and me as being a substitute for cash reparations. Nothing at all. You want to know why South Africa is still in the same sorry shape that it was before the end of apartheid? Look at who's coming over here from that place. These are the people who refused to fight white power in Africa, and now they're over here in the U.S. fighting against us. But even after having the nerve to spout that gibberish, this individual who the AP/Cal Matters was quoting was forced to admit that support for cash reparations is growing. But they do it as a throwaway line at the end of the sentence, after they've pushed their misrepresented stats at you. That's a CYA maneuver for them, by the way. This was supposed to be counting as intellectual honesty on the part of the white media. This is an IQ test that they're instituting, and a lot of black folks will fail it. But we see the California Assembly's own Black Caucus stonewalling this. Obviously, they're meat puppets for white power, but they should still be held accountable for the part that they're playing in all this. And this should tell you everything you need to know about the black misleadership class. Now, if you had some clown in the political arena who you liked, this should disabuse you of that particular illusion. They never band together to stop legislation for anybody else. They certainly never band together to stop legislation that harms black people. They certainly never band together to push for legislation that benefits us. But when it comes to towing the line for white power, they form together like Voltron. That's the entire point of having a legislative caucus. Strength in numbers. So that in the legislature, you can band together as a group, vote as a block, so that you are able to slow down or even eliminate legislation that you don't approve of, and that you can come together as a block so that you can forward and ramrod legislation through that you do approve of. That's the entire point of having a legislative caucus. Strength in numbers, so you can get what you need done. You at least know you got a certain number of votes for a particular piece of legislation no matter what, because you're all voting together and standing together for each other's interests. But the only thing that California's Black Assembly Caucus is able to come together for is to fight us. That tells you who they see as being their real political enemy, now doesn't it? The black media's been saying it for the longest time. The Democrats, and that includes these bootlicks that they put in front of the cameras, to them, their real enemy is not and has never been the Republicans. Their real enemy has been black people. That's what it's been all along. As far as they're concerned, the Republicans are an essential part of their own political machine, because the Republicans are how they scare black people into voting for these guys and not opposing them on anything. Don't put their feet to the fire. Don't force them to put through any sort of changes. Oh, this reparations thing. Y'all shouldn't be fighting for these kind of policies now. We got to be worried about these Republicans. That's the purpose that the Republicans serve. To try to scare you and me into sitting on our hands while we get ourselves eliminated, and to tell us to vote for these clowns while they do nothing for us. Because if not, well, these Republicans, they'd be even worse. Well, please tell me, what could the Republicans do that's worse than what this California Black Assembly Caucus has done? I'm not saying the Republicans aren't bad, they are, but tell me how it's any different. How is it any worse? So you had the San Francisco NAACP, which no doubt speaks for the national NAACP leadership. They publicly denounced the idea of cash reparations. And they put out a press release. They wanted the whole world to see, Weeze is against cash reparations. Notice that through line, everybody uses that same phrase, no cash reparations. And when you see all these different people from all these disparate groups using the exact same language on the exact same issue, that's how you know the memo got sent out. That's how you know there's a program at work here. And now you got California's State Black Assembly Caucus, who have officially put aside any pretense that they were ever for reparations. Your civil rights retreads, and these old fossils, these old sellout legislators, they're showing you where they've always stood. This is why I love reparations as a political issue, because it is so dangerous to white power and everybody who benefits from it, including these bootlicks, that they have no choice but to fight against it. They have to, because we have presented the bastards with an existential crisis. Reparations, cash reparations, threatens the system in its entirety. It forces everybody to have to show where they stand. It is so explosive. It is so reactionary. It is so beneficial. It is so just that all of the corrupt and crumbling misleaders and the sock puppet white masters who got their hands up their behinds, they have to stand against it. They can't sit on the sidelines. They have to fight it. And in the aggregate, that's damn good because black people have made it a habit to live in denial. We've made it a habit to put our heads in the sand and to ignore the fact that the Reggie Sawyers and the rest of these sellouts have been fighting against us. We make excuses for them 24/7. We've been doing it for generations. My black assembly representative, he ain't no sellout. He been representing us for 30 years. He done did lots for us. We've had an enemy within festering for decades now. And when you ignore the enemy within, that's suicidal. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that you're going to cut your own throat, but it does mean that you'll hand the knife over to these bootlicks so that they can slit your throat. This is what Dr. Claude Anderson's been talking about for over 40 years. Black politicians who are chosen, funded, and fielded by white power, and who, as soon as they're in office, all they do is to attack us. By the way, where are the Democrat shills at times like this? I'd sure love to see them stick up for the Democrats now. And where are the N-Cobras at? Where's Big Bird at? You have the most populous state in the country talking about reparations, and the self-proclaimed oldest reparations group in America, they're not there pushing for it. They're not there calling out the state assembly caucus. See, now that true reparations are being made an actual political issue, and it's actually coming to the floor, it's getting closer and closer to fruition, these old other so-called reparations advocates are nowhere to be seen. And it ain't because they don't know about it. It's because their job is to be controlled opposition. And what happened is the black grassroots pushed the bastards out of the room. As far as they're concerned, since they don't want to damage themselves anymore in the eyes of white power, it's a matter of you can't stand out there being irrelevant. They know if they try to get out there with a megaphone, if Big Bird put on his mama's tablecloth again and stood out in front of the cameras, everybody would either laugh at him, they would ignore him, or they would hound him from the room. So they can't allow white power to see them being completely and thoroughly irrelevant and ignored or even attacked by the black masses. That would be the end of even the crumbs of the butter biscuits that they've been counting on, so instead they just hide in the shadows. So we've already driven these scumbags from the political arena. But now it's time for these corrupt and crumbling chumps in these political offices. It's time for them to go next. These same black assembly caucus members, they were tripping over their own shoelaces to give hundreds of millions of dollars to illegal aliens. And to give LGBT causes and everybody else money, they weren't about to block any of that legislation. But when it comes to black people, they have no shame in showing us who and what they've always been. This is the final verdict on just how deep the rot runs in the black political circle. They're putting everything on the line to fight against black voters. Why is it that they never show up whenever you summon them? Why is it that they know about us and the black grassroots? They know about the black media. They send their shills and suck-ups to attack us, but they never, ever, ever engage with us directly. Why is it that they never stick up for our interest? Because they are and have always been against us. This is what the black media has been talking about for over a decade and a half now. It's why we have never been gung-ho about backing these local or state candidates any more than we've been all enthused about backing candidates at the federal level. Because the rot runs up and down the political ladder. And for the people who keep arguing with us, who keep being contrary for contrariness' sake, you need to stand up and stick up for your people. Because these bootlicking Black Caucus members, these are the enemy. As the black media, we've told you about them individually. I made an entire video calling out the entire immigrant Black Caucus in D.C. I went after name after name after name, telling you who they were, where their families came from, what foreign countries their families came from, when they got here. We don't have the luxury of doing that for every single one of these corrupt and crumbling black politicians out there. We don't have the luxury of going over each one of them, giving you a scorecard, and here it is. That's part of the reason why we do what we do, so that whenever you see these fools fighting against our interests, you already know exactly why that probably is. And even if these people don't have an immigrant background, the problem is we got more than enough homegrown bootlicks, but we need to be looking out for them too. All these crooked state legislators, all of them want to make it to D.C., because that's where the big bribes and the big corporate payoffs are at. As the black media, we have to make sure that when people make it a point that they're going to interfere with, stymie, or even try to stonewall our interests, their road to higher office ends. As the black media, that's part of our job. You have never seen them reach out to us, and whenever we call ourselves reaching out to them, they ignore us. And by reaching out to them, I mean when we're calling them out. Whenever we try to contact them directly, they know exactly who the hell they are. Or like this Reggie Sawyer creep did, they mock us. They know exactly who we are. They know exactly why we're there. A lot of folks ask why it is that I'm not constantly banging the drum about voting locally. This is a good example. There's nothing wrong with voting locally. You can certainly have more impact at the local level than you can on the federal offices. But the question is, who the hell is on the ballots? That's the problem. It's the exact same problem we face with the federal elections. White power made it a point that they were going to have their shills, bootlicks, and sellouts at the local level too. So at least locally, you can talk to your neighbors and get them on code about things. But understand something. It's going to be an uphill fight in the near term, just like getting reparations brought before the California Assembly was an uphill fight in the near term. But just like with that issue, the key is persistence. Now understand something. We have a lot of nameless, faceless sock puppet shill accounts who whine at us and say, you needs to vote locally. All right, black people did vote locally. And look what happened here. Your state representatives sided with white supremacy against black people, their own constituents. Now, what kind of politician deliberately commits political suicide like that? One who thinks that their lifeline isn't the black voter. A black politician who's standing in front of black constituents who put them in office, they would only sit there and commit political suicide if they're thinking, well, these black voters, they're not the ones who are putting me in office, and they're not the ones I need to stay there either. Voting local is important. We can certainly have more of an impact with local elections than federal ones, but even local elections means nothing when white power pulls the same con game with your city councilmen and state representatives as they do with presidential candidates. And when the bastards feel so emboldened that they can openly mock you on issues that they know are crucial and critical to your survival, on the single most important issue facing black people, that's how you know that we have never had any actual representation. As we continue to put pressure on white power, their black bootlicks are being forced to defend the system and to openly oppose us, because they were always on the side of white supremacy to begin with. And I would beg everybody's pardon for this next part, because I know that it's somewhat out of character for me. But when talking about garbage like the California Black Assembly Caucus, well, they definitely got the right name because they certainly do put the ass in assembly. Speaking of which, that also tells black voters where they should put their foot, too. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Eric Bailey, B1 Incorporated, Latoya Holloway, Sabrina, and Chevalier Foster. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.